This is Katie Willett, welcoming you to Now You Know. Chris Perkins is our host. And Chris, you introduce our guest that is going to take us on a wonderful, wonderful trip. First time. And we expect to have you back.
Well, there we go. She's putting a high burden on the guest already. So welcome this morning, folks, to Now You Know. And we have a special guest today, Mike Walker. And Mike, I have known you for years in different capacities, really. He worked for us at Whittemore's Real Estate for how many years, Mike?
13.
13? You stopped on a lucky year, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, and did very well for us.
14.
14.
Yeah. And
then decided to retire from that, but a lot of people know him as the German teacher at Skowhegan Area High School. And how many years were you there?
41.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
So
a few years.
And you've been retired for what, 2 years?
This is
now?
going to my third. This
going
is
on a third.
Entering a third.
Okay, and you haven't been sitting idly by during those years.
Not at all.
You and your wife Jean, and I think Jean is the travel booker. And
I call her the architect of these trips.
She's the architect of the trips, and they've been going on a series of trips, literally around the world, over the years. And when I first talked to Mike a few weeks ago, I said, you know, you've done like 4 trips, and let's put it all on the show and do that. Well, he had so many pictures of these trips that there was no way we could compress all that into 1 hour. So we have decided to concentrate on one that I think you folks will really enjoy. And that is his trip to New Zealand. And as Katie mentioned, we'll probably have you back in the future for other trips as well. We're going to have like our own version of the Travel Channel on this show,
yeah.
So it's going to be kind of interesting. But I think it's going to be very enjoyable for the audience, I think. So, Mike, New Zealand, 6 weeks in New Zealand, right?
6 weeks in New Zealand. It was wonderful. It
was
fantastic. Yeah, we decided, and we had taken our first big trip to Oman, and that did a library presentation. But as I said, my wife plans these trips, and she said, well, how do you feel about New Zealand? And people ask, well, why New Zealand? And honestly, it was, we were not big Lord of the Rings fans. I mean, I like the movies, etc. But seeing there was a shot, I remember, and I thought, boy, it looks like Austria. It looked like the Alps. And, of course, it was the Southern Alps of New Zealand.
Alps, yes.
And in that particular movie, they shot, except for one scene, they shot entirely in New Zealand, 150 different locations in New Zealand. So that was in the back of our mind, because when that first came out, it was 8-10 years ago. And, you know, you think, geez, that's a beautiful country. And so, of course, being retired, you have time to travel. And I think the other thing was you can pick the time, and we chose, you know, for us it was February here. Escaping winter was not a bad thing.
Yeah.
So we
just
went
the opposite down there.
Just the opposite. They were coming out of their summer, which is one of the hottest summers they had, and so when we got there it was 65 to 75 every day. I mean, we were in shorts for 6 weeks, and
it's pretty ideal weather.
Yeah, we'll talk about this rainstorm that we avoided, thank goodness. But we had barely any rain in the entire 6 weeks, so we really had a great time.
So a little bit of geography. So, and I think most people have an idea where New Zealand is, but really it's off, a ways off the coast. I think it's like 1,200 miles off the coast of Australia.
Yeah, it is.
And you have to travel a heck of a long ways from Maine to get to New Zealand.
Yeah.
Describe the trip process a little
Well,
bit.
the trip, as you can see by the first slide, is we took a bus to Boston. We stayed with our son Jared in Scarborough, and then took a trip we drove the bus to Boston. And from there, we flew to San Francisco. In San Francisco, you had a couple-hour layover, and then it was a 13-hour flight to Auckland.
Oh, geez.
And you gain 18 hours. So it's interesting because we left Wednesday, arrived Friday. It was a reverse on the way back. On the way back, we flew out of Christchurch to fly to Auckland to San Francisco. But we flew out at 11 in the morning, on Thursday and landed in Boston at 4:30 Thursday the same day. So because we picked up in all that traveling.
How many hours difference?
18 hours
18
difference.
hours.
Yeah. So when I would write an email, people saying what the time frame they were seeing Friday, and one of my friends called me Future Man because these were coming from the future almost. It might be Friday in New Zealand, it's still Thursday in Maine. So that was kind of funny.
How do you pass the time on a 13-hour flight? Do you read? You sleep a lot? I mean, that's a long flight. The longest flight I've ever flown was to Hawaii.
Right.
But I did it in 2 stages.
Yeah.
I flew from Maine to San Francisco, which was about 6.5 hours, and then another 6 from San Francisco to Honolulu.
Right.
And that was long enough, but 13 hours straight?
Well, I tend to think about these things ahead of time. It's like, geez, what am I going to do? But, part of it is you almost have to take a Zen approach and settle into it. But what I did is I had reading material, but Jean also on Kindles, she's Miss Technology. I mean, all the technology we have to help along these trips, but on a Kindle. But surprisingly, United had about 50 movies to choose from and many current ones. So actually, I ended up watching 4 movies.
Yeah.
And what I would do is watch a movie and then think, well, am I tired? And I don't sleep a lot, as you probably well know.
Yeah.
School, I used to get up at 4 in the morning and be at school at 6 in the morning, and I still get up early. But passing the time, they had really, really good movies, and so I'd watch a movie and maybe read a little bit. If I felt fine, I might watch another one. So believe it or not, the time passed, and I tried not to think about time. I'd look at the thing and say, okay, we got another 7 hours to go, but I'd say, well, I'll just close my eyes and I would doze a little bit, wake up, feel pretty good, watch another movie, and so before you know it, we're in Auckland. And it was we did pass the time.
Did you suffer a little from jet lag?
When we got there, certainly you get there, and Gene was smart. We picked a place called Green Bay, and we stayed a half an hour from Auckland, and stayed one whole day there. And the next day we explored. But we landed and got to bed early. I'm just guessing 7:30 their time that night, and I woke up probably 5 or 6 in the morning. Felt great. We showered and all that stuff. But the nice part, we were staying there at that Airbnb and then explored. And we explored similar like traveling here to Waterville, but it was such a beautiful area. We hiked a little bit, and, so you start catching up.
Now, you folks did Airbnbs through the whole thing?
Yep.
Was it any...
Airbnbs and hostels also.
And hostels.
Yep.
Was it any difficulty lining these things up?
No, Jean, as I said, she is the technology queen, and she has sites that she follows, and so she, ahead of time, there are many, many Airbnbs, and the other thing is, as we mentioned, it was their fall, so a little bit off season, so there were plenty to choose from, and we had just tremendous experiences. Some, and part of it because we really weren't sure sometimes if you might be held up in a spot or you want to stay an extra day, so that was hard to plan a 6-week trip and have be point A and point B every single day.
Yeah, so do you find the people very friendly there? I always get the impression that
tremendous.
Is it appropriate to call them Kiwis?
Kiwis, absolutely.
The Kiwis are very friendly people, or New Zealanders, I guess, either way.
Travelers in general, we met people from all over the world. I mean, it was just remarkable. When you stay at a hostel, and it was young and old, and we met kids who are 18, 20, traveling the world, and we met adults doing the same thing. And of course, we were adults. We were at the time 64, now 65, and it was just tremendous because the hostels have people from all over the world in cooking facilities. You have your own room, and of course, you have bathrooms. But the in the homes, we just had some tremendous experiences. I mean, really just beautiful people, and you felt comfortable, and so it was just in the travels you meet. I think the hardest thing you can imagine me. I'm not a void. You when you're hiking, you see people. You're saying hello to everyone.
Yeah.
Good morning, good morning. So there was a lot of good mornings.
Well, that's refreshing.
It is. It really is. There was. Believe it or not, there was no political talk. It was just more travel and just, interesting meeting people from all over the world. That was fantastic. Plus the people of New Zealand, because New Zealand is a land of, 4.7 million people. So it's not for the size of the country. And I should mention, people ask, how big is New Zealand? And roughly, if you overlaid it on New England, it stretches from northern Maine to about Pennsylvania, so if it gives you an idea.
Yeah.
And, of course, it doesn't have the breadth of America by any means. I saw one statistic that you're never 80 miles from any ocean. So no matter where you are in New Zealand,
Yeah, it's not very wide.
It's not very wide.
And not very wide.
Yeah,
but
as you can see by my shirt.
Yeah,
I wore this. You take a trip and come back with a T-shirt.
Now, there are two main islands,
Yep.
which are simply the North Island and the
Yep,
South,
the South
Island.
Island.
But there are a whole bunch of little islands, too.
There are, yes.
But
Yeah.
you concentrated on the two main
we
islands, right?
spent 2 weeks in the north, and
Yeah.
we really went from Auckland north and came down the west coast, and then we want to do this Tongariro Alpine crossing, which is in the middle.
Yeah.
And then Wellington, we're going to cross over on the ferry from there to the south. So you really had to kind of pick and choose where you're going to go. And
Wellington's the capital.
Wellington's the capital, correct.
Just real quick in terms of the government there and so forth. I understand, I think I read that it's a constitutional
monarchy.
Yeah.
The Queen of England.
The Queen of England is still the head of state
Correct,
there,
yep.
but they have a prime minister and a governor general, which I think the Queen appoints and so forth. So it's and a one or unicameral legislature.
Yeah, there's three branches of government
of legislature, and they got a Supreme Court and all that stuff. So it's kind of and it from what I read, it's rated highly as a democracy.
It is.
In terms of openness and lack of corruption and all the kind of the things that I generally had understood about New Zealand before. So
I saw an article after we came back said it was rated the second least corrupt nation in the world. I can't remember what number one was, but that's impressive because as we see in the news, there are a lot of corrupt governments or corruption within governments. But anyway, it was wonderful.
It was pretty impressive.
It was very impressive.
Well, maybe what we should do, because you've got so many slides to show here today, we should get right into that. I believe you have like 45. Folks, we're not sure we're going to get through all of them, but we're going to do as much as we can within the hour.
Right.
And as I said, Mike is a standing invitation to come back again, so we've probably got a lot of other stuff to show you from around the world over time here. So why don't we get right into it?
Okay. The first slide here is, of course, just showing you where New Zealand is. I do have a pointer we can see, but you can see that New Zealand here is, as Chris mentioned, is east of Australia. And that's part of a continent or landmass called Zealandia, which is what we see is 7% of what lies below the ocean. So 93% of the landmass is below the ocean. But we flew from, as we mentioned, from Maine to San Francisco and then flew to New Zealand. And the next slide here gives you an idea. Here is the North and South Island, and we sorry about that. We landed in Auckland, which is pretty much it's further north than the central, but then we headed north to the Kerikeri Peninsula, and we came down, and so as you can see here, there's a wing to the east. We did not go there because Wellington is in the south. Wellington is located at the southeast tip of the North Island. So 2 weeks we knew we were going to cross over on the ferry. So that's why we didn't go to that large, the peninsula here, because if you drive, let's say 6 or 7 hours in, you've got to drive 6 or 7 hours back. So, So in terms of bang of the buck, and you can see the South Island is pretty evenly divided. It's the South Island is in terms of north to south, but we again crossed over. And we went down the west coast, crossed to the east coast, headed back inland to do to see Mount Cook, which is the highest mountain in New Zealand, about 12,000 feet.
Yeah, about 12,000 feet. And there are a bunch of mountains, particularly in the Southern Alps area,
the Southern
that are
Alps,
9,000-10,000 feet or so.
Yeah, it stretches from north to south, from Nelson in the north to all the way to the south in Fiordland, they call it. So the Milford Sound, people have heard of that track and stuff. So we spent 4 weeks in the south, and there were so many experiences. And as you mentioned, I picked 45 slides, but I could have picked, for the library presentation, I did one of 500, far too many. And I showed my mother's at the Reddington home, and I showed the ladies there 170. I think for some, that might have been a little bit too long.
With the eyes glossing over?
Well, some yes. It was sitting in any presentation, I think, so. But it's wonderful. But it's just, so we'll get into the slides here. This was, when we first landed, as I mentioned, this is a gannet colony, protected gannet colony here in Murat Bay. It is Morawai Beach, it's called. We stayed west of Auckland in Green Bay, and so we explored that first day, as you mentioned, jet lag, but we did a hike, and this reminded me we had gone to the Azores with our family the summer before that, and it reminded us a lot of that. Of course, these volcanic, islands, coming out of the sea. The Azores is similar. So this was one of our first hikes, and it was just beautiful. But
and
you can
the
imagine.
north was very volcanic.
Very,
wasn't
yes,
it?
yeah, even the south too. I mean, the whole country is volcanic, but this just to give you an example. We took, I was Captain Kodak. We took, and all our pictures, by the way, are taken on an iPhone. I've got an i7, which is Gene's old phone. Gene's got an i10, and so all our pictures happen to be with that. Yeah, this is, and when we landed for Auckland, our first venture north was going north to, and one thing we loved about New Zealand is anytime you're traveling from point A to point B, we were traveling up to Opanoni, which is about 4 hours north. Along the way, you might have 4 or 5 different very interesting things to see. And this is one of them called the Kauri Forest. And the Kauri trees are similar to like our sequoias. This tree here is called the Lord of the Forest, Tain Mahuta. 58 feet girth, and the trunk is something like 58 feet tall. Father Time, of course, has some branches have fallen off because it's between 1,200 and 2,500 years old, that tree. Wow. We saw a group of trees called the Four Sisters that were, you looked at them and they looked like 80-year-old trees, but the youngest was 400 years old.
And that's you and Gene standing
That's
there?
Gene and I standing there, correct.
Well, that gives you some sense of how big that tree is. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's called the Kauri dieback, and they have a disease, probably like our emerald ash borer at this point. So what you have to do going into this forest, you have to brush your feet on a brush and then spray. You step on this grate that sprays your shoes to kill any bacteria in your shoes. Yeah. And they usually, as you can see, there's a little fence. You can't walk up because one of the things about the dieback is in the roots, and it's in the cell. It's a cellular disease. So by bringing in fact, when we came into New Zealand, I thankfully had new hiking shoes I hadn't worn yet. The same type I had, and they checked them at the airport because if it's muddy, they won't let you take them in because you're bringing in, organisms from Maine or wherever you're from. Yeah. So anyway, that was good. So this is the Kauri Forest. We're on our way to Opanoni. We stayed at a seaside called Opanoni again, and there are many pictures we left out. But we by the way went with this guidebook by Scott Cook. Absolutely fantastic, because this is one of the things that was in the guidebook you might not even know about, but this man must have covered every inch, every hike on the entire land, because these are called the Co2 Boulders, and you'll see when we get to the South Island, they also saw boulders. These are called concretions, and they figure they take about 5 million years to form.
Looks like a big coconut or something.
It does, but this beach was full of them. And what happens is, as millions of years, they're in sedimentary rock. As the ocean floor rose, during volcanic and tectonic activity, and then erosion over time, over millions of years, what they literally do is pop out. And I have a picture that's not included here, but when we went to the Moraki boulders in the south, I took one that's literally embedded in the sedimentary rock, and as that begins to erode, it'll just pop out. But they figured this was about 5 million years old just to form, and who knows how many, hundreds of millions of years perhaps it took. So they believe what it is something dies. I mean, some sea animal, and as it decays, calcite, forming agent, encapsulates, and it starts to form around it and hardens. And of course, with tectonic activity and volcanic activity, that hardens. The seabed rises, and you can see in the background there the mountains surrounding it.
I've never seen anything like that.
I know, I hadn't either, and it's just amazing. We went north to the Kerikeri Peninsula. And this is Poo Hickey Hill. And as you can see there, we took many pictures, but we visited that day 5 different beaches, and almost all of them were deserted. Partly school had just gotten to session. You would go back and you see, welcome back school, and we're thinking, I'm not in school anymore. So the kids were back to school in New Zealand because they were coming out of their summer vacation, which of course would be February, is the end of summer. Yeah. But this beach reminded me a lot of Ogunquit. I mean, it was white sand, absolutely beautiful, because we went down later and walked, to the end of that. But it just gave you an idea of the land, the islands, as you mentioned, off the coast, the weather. It's emblematic of what we experienced. And we were in shorts here, and this is called Poo Hickey Hill. And that's the other thing about New Zealand. a lot of driving because you're driving on the left-hand side of the road.
That's right.
The right-hand side of the cars, and the blinker and the wipers are exactly opposite. So needless to say, the first day you talk about...
You had to get used to that.
I had about 30 times the first day.
You didn't run in any traffic circles, did you?
We had plenty of them.
Did you? That's the confusing part.
It really wasn't. I mean, but we had gone to Ireland in 2013. That did prepare us really well for that, I must say. But a lot of hairpin turns, a lot of Alpine driving in New Zealand, but you get used to just drive the speed limit or less, and we're fine.
Good.
But this is Poo Hickey Hill, so this is showing. The next day we wanted to go to Cape Orenda, which is on here is the northernmost tip of the North Island, and we call it. I didn't put a picture in, but it looked like a Mad Max vehicle, this huge bus. And the reason why you really have to take the bus, and again, in Opanoni, a woman at the information center, and the information centers were fantastic. She said, you're best to really go with this bus and take the trip because it's well worth it, because driving is very tough, both in with time and the roads and gas. And it really was well worth it, because what you do is you drive along sand dunes, and on the right of sand dunes, and very few places to turn out, and you get the sea, the Tasman Sea on your left, so a crashing sea. So they go at low tide when they pick you up at the spot, and then one of the stops you can do sand sliding. They show you they have right on board. They have these slides, so we climbed up, went down. That's not me, by the way, but this was but we had a blast, And then we were headed to Cape Ringa. Cape Ringa, beautiful. This is one spot again. This is where the Tasman Sea and the Pacific come together, so you have this hydraulic, and you can see it. It's like this churning sea, because again, the Tasman Sea is between Australia and New Zealand, and then of course the Pacific runs from this is part of the Ring of Fire with all the volcanic activity. It's also a very spiritual place, because one thing I haven't mentioned so far is the Maori are the indigenous people of New Zealand.
Yes. 15%. I was going to talk to you about it. And they came there, if I read right, back in like 1250,
they did.
1300.
Exactly.
And they were Polynesians?
Polynesians, yeah. And you imagine these open-faced boats that you can imagine going over the open sea to discover this
land. And they have
land.
their own language, too.
They do.
Predominantly English.
Yes.
Yes. Almost everybody speaks
English. They do. But the thing is, of the signs, and I'm sure this is part of what's happening with this country, too, sometimes with Native Americans, almost all your signs had Maori and the English. So Mount Cook, I think it's Aroki, is the name for Mount Cook. Mount Cook was named after the explorer.
Is there language like anything else? Or
no, I not that I know. Well, it may be tied in with a Polynesian language there, but as far as English, no. And as I may be butchering some of these names even, but because they are mostly here are Maori. And even Maori, you see the dash above the A, But this here is sacred land, and I don't know if you remember, Adam Fine was a student of mine who died tragically last winter when a thing collapsed, and what we had tried to arrange with the family is take some of his ashes to this spot, because Cape Ringa is very spiritual. You can't eat or drink at this spot. Maori, and what they believe in is there's a tree, and they believe that the spirits would go down the roots of this tree, and there's an island off the coast called Three Kings, and that the spirits would take one last look at this land here as they're going back to Hawaii, their ancestral land and family. So for Adam, I took a long pause and thought of Adam, and here it was spiritual. I mean, you have tourists obviously as coming here, and so it's we did even a funny thing with a lighthouse. So it looked like we were playing chess too. But I really respect for the Maori, because when we did this Mad Max vehicle, they took us about 5 miles away to a bay. You eat lunch, it was provided, and then they bring them up here, and our driver was Maori too, and so that was really neat. I'll talk more about that later in the Tongariro. This doesn't look like much, but again, with this Scott Cook, what was kind of neat is he guided you in terms of saying, look, you can go pay for, we want to see glowworms. Yeah. And he said, but if you go to this camping site, they have facilities here, he said, you can go in this cave, bring water shoes, go in this cave. And he said, and you walk in about 100 yards. He said, you're going to have to walk through some water. And then stay there 7 minutes. Let your eyes, the rods and cones in your eyes, adapt and shut off all your headlamps and all that stuff. And it was incredible. It was like the Milky Way. I mean, because you shut it off, your eyes get adjusted to the dark, and like seeing all the glowworms on the ceiling was literally like stars at night. It was an incredible experience. Met a couple in there from Poland. Wow. They had nighttime, our phones would not pick it up. It was just too blurry, I mean, just you needed, a time element to capture it. But that was magical. So, and there was no danger of getting lost here either. So we climbed in here and you walked in 100 yards. You could have gone further, but that was a very neat, and it was quite a large cave inside too, and so glowworms. So it doesn't look like much, but it was really neat. And they were also teaching a group of kids rappelling. So they were doing rock climbing on the side of this, and the campground, as I said, it was really neat. We left the Kerikeri Peninsula and we made our way down the North Island to the west.
Okay.
It's called the Coromandel Peninsula. And the Coromandel is in a beautiful, beautiful area. And this is, from there we stayed in Thames. But from Thames, that became, I think we stayed there 2 or 3 nights and did trips, from there. This is called Hot Water Beach because, as you know, it's a volcanic island.
Yes.
And when you dig in this sand, the water coming up is 147 degrees.
Oh, my God.
And they tell you this. So you can rent these shovels. That's why it looks almost like the Bill Murray movie. He's digging in the golf course here.
Yeah.
So everybody's digging. We met a couple from San Francisco, ironically, who's an engineer. So he said, hey, look, we'll build this. So he had the engineering. So what we did is we drained the hot water down, and what happens, the sea comes in and mixes with it, so you can sit in it. So it's kind of a warm bath, So it was really, really neat, And in fact, this slide is, I'm here to the right. With the couple we met from San Francisco, and we just had a blast. I mean, and that's why I say you met people from all over the world, and we joined them, and so we kind of combined our talents, digging talents. And you can see the warm water is coming down from above, draining into this little pool to my left in the picture, and the sea's coming in and mixing. He's digging, so the seawater is mixing with it, so you can sit in this pool of very warm water, instead of scalding water.
Yeah.
But this was Hot Water Beach, and as I mentioned to you earlier, anytime we drove from point A to point B, there were so many points of interest, because after we left here, we went to, which is called Cathedral Beach. And if anybody saw the Chronicles of Narnia and The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, one of the scenes was right here. I've seen the scene on YouTube where the kids, there's a rushing subway go through, and all of a sudden they're transported to this area. That's what they're filming. This was about a 45-minute walk in, but again, it was just beautiful. A beautiful day, a warm day, but they have walkways, etc., led down to here. And it was just beautiful. I mean, as I said, we took pictures here, and as you can see, this was also the same beach. And one of the things that islands and you see many around the world is erosion, and that's this rock you see in the water was one time part of that. And you can see
that limestone.
That's limestone, exactly right. It looks like the White Cliffs of Dover.
Yeah,
almost.
It does.
Yeah. But you can see with the trees there, and that's one of the things you face is the roots of those trees are getting in. So you have water, and you have freezing and time and ice, and so who knows how long it took for that to erode.
Does it get that cold up in that part of the... I didn't think it did.
In the mountains they get snow, but I asked, and sometimes it sounds like our mid-Atlantic states, like you might get some snow, and then it turns to either rain or melts, and you get temperate. And there are other zones of New Zealand where you would get colder weather, and roads are impassable because of if you're higher altitudes.
Of course, you get down the southern part towards Antarctica, then it's starting to get a little cold down there.
Yeah, and you have, because the northern part, you're closer to the equator.
Seems kind of counterintuitive where we are, but the farther south you go, the colder it gets.
Exactly. Yeah. And you think of our country, I mean, Maine, you drive, to, let's say, Pennsylvania, and they get snow, but, parts of, New York, Pennsylvania does not get the snowfall we get. So this was a beautiful day, and so we then headed inland, and what Jean wanted to do, and she said, I really want to do this, and again, it's called the Tongariro Alpine Crossing, and what it is Yeah, this is on Maori land, and the Tongariro is a volcano. You can see this volcano here. That's Mount Doom of Lord of the Rings, because you have CGI, but that's Mount Doom.
Is that still somewhat active?
That's the last. That last time that erupted was quite a while ago. But there's Arapaho, which is another mountain that did erupt in 2012, I think it was. Lava flow, but exploded. And they have signs saying, in case of volcano, do this. I'm thinking, you don't have to talk twice, because you see steam vents, when inside of these mountains, steam coming up all the time. So, it is volcanic activity. But we hike past this, and it's a 12-mile hike. And of course, they added the word Alpine crossing because the weather conditions. They want people to be aware that because you're in really an alpine zone, anytime the weather can change, so be prepared. And I won't go into it, but we saw people very ill-prepared with water and stuff. We carried 3 liters apiece, which I'm glad we had it, because it turned, we started at 57 degrees. By midday, it was 75, and warm. The other thing was really neat is at our Airbnb, a Maori person, he has a little business, picked us up and brought us like a 45-minute drive to get there. But in the morning, what he did is he blessed the land and thanked the gods for allowing us to pass, safe passage, and also sang a song in English and Maori, a prayer, which was really neat. It was very spiritual because you're there, looking at this Mount Doom in the darkness, and the sun's coming up behind the mountains, and then you begin your hike, and so it was really neat. A lot of people, but it took us about 7 hours. We started at about 7 in the morning, and when we got at the other end where he was going to pick us up, it was 2:30 in the afternoon. And so it was wonderful. But that's called the Tongariro Alpine Crossing. And again, I had lots of pictures, but I just had this one. Ooh. This is another sim from the same. We're now up on Mount Tongariro, looking down. This is the Emerald Lake.
Oh, it looks emerald.
And it does, and it's. Part of it is, because of the minerals in the water, the sunlight reflects it. And from here, you could look over and see that's the Blue Lake. And so from Mount Tongariro, we were looking down at this and looking to our left, basically, which would be the west, and seeing the Blue Mountain where we're going to hike. So you could really see where you're going. But it was just beautiful. And I took pictures, of course, Gene's standing next to this, and we had to hike down the scree, which is very interesting because it's all loose rock.
Ooh.
So to get down to it, and then you're walking across to get to this called Blue Lake. And again, no eating or drinking is allowed here. I mean, of course, how do you police that? But I think people are very respectful of it, So, we took photos here.
Okay.
And this is near Lake Taupo where we stay. We stay in Tarangi, which is Lake Taupo was formed as a huge lake, similar to Moose Head. Formed about 35,000 years ago, glacier. But Hot Springs, you can see that water is bubbling up out of the ground. Yes. But inside, what they have is like these cubicles where you can rent time, and they have a hot water pool about 90 degrees. And so we did this. We had hiked the Tongariro the day before, and we drove through the forest, the national forest, and it was just beautiful. And of course, you got long views of where we had hiked, and we said, well, why don't we do that? It was like $8 or something.
That's good for your muscles after a long hike.
I could only stay there. The girl was really nice, I think, because we talked with her, and she seemed to like us, so she gave us extra time. I couldn't stay any longer. I was there. Gene did took a picture of me, and yeah. And needless to say, it was great though. So it was wonderful. And from Tongariro, we headed from here south, and I mentioned before we got on the broadcast, is that as we were heading south too, we ended up in where they're doing the Ironman competition, and New Zealand holds that, and they hold one in Hawaii too. So that was wonderful. I mean, to see that, and so this is Wellington. That's the only shot of Wellington. That's a beautiful city. It's the capital city of about. I've heard up to 500,000, and then I saw another one 200,000. But we went to 2 free museums there. But what I like is very compact. They have a botanical garden, stadium. There was a rugby match that was going to happen on Saturday. I think we were there on Thursday, and so we weren't going to stay for that. But there was esplanades along the walkway, and this was right outside. I think it's called Mount Victoria. Overlooking, the city of Wellington, and we took the ferry from there to the.
So now we're on the South Island.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Wellington's on the very tip of the North Island.
Oh, okay.
But we're going to cross over. But from here, we're going to cross to the south the next day, but
Okay.
we were exploring here. But we went into Wellington. We stayed in Johnsonville, which is about 9 miles outside the city, with a
Okay.
wonderful couple. You know, they were just great too. And we stayed in touch, which is kind of neat.
Nice.
And so this was just a very modern city, and really parked our car within walking distance. You had the botanical garden, museums, beautiful stores. You know, it was just a nice city. And we did avoid cities overall. We liked Wellington. Of course, the ferry was here, so we had to. But we didn't go into Auckland, for example, you know, because we just love nature. In Wellington, they have the Weka, where the Lord of the Rings and you know, some other movies are done. This is where they do the workshops, all the costumes and the CGI. Gollum was waiting there, and he was eating a fish, and I was saying, "Hey, how about a little bite of that?" And of course, he was a little suspicious of me. So
Yeah, you can see.
you can see he didn't like that very much, you know. But, no, but we had fun with that, because outside they had, I don't even know, the animal, the big almost trolls. You know, you're standing there, and I imitated one of those, and there was a big, you know, creature there, and I was looking at him like this, and I said, he claimed I stepped on his foot, so I had to drop him like a bad habit. But so we just had a great time. And again, this Scott Cook guidebook said you could take the tour for something like $20 or $30 a piece, or just stay right here in the free showroom, and you get just about as much. And I agreed. So anyhow.
Yeah.
We are now, Chris. We crossed over took the Picton ferry, and we stayed in a campground. And we were going to do a hike, but they had predicted, believe it or not, rain. And this is the first time in 2.5 weeks. So we said, well, let's kind of change course. And again, this is Gene. Is we went to the very tip of the South Island north, in the northernmost point. And, you know, here is the cape called Cape Farewell.
Okay.
You can see here where the cliff here with the opening, you know, sea erosion, but very few people here. In fact, we thought we had the wrong place. We had to open our own gates to get in there.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and it was wonderful. But you saw a lot of sheep, a lot of cows, and I guess there are 9 sheep per person in New Zealand. So you're talking a lot of sheep.
I understood sheep, wool is a big deal down there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so here, and again, a lot of things, as I mentioned, they had, it was another beach where we were able to see a seal and caves up close, and at low tide, there was a little island cave you could have gone out to, but it was high tide at the time, so we couldn't, but it was just, again, a wonderful experience to be able to, you know, walk up here, and very few people, you know, so. The next day, we did what is called the Abel Tasman hike, and what they do, if I look at my cheat sheet here, the Midlands Beach, and where we were staying at this Kerry campground, we went from the campground, and they pick you up by boat and bring you about an hour north to Midlands Beach and drop you off. Okay. But what you have to do is walk 4 hours, a 4-hour trek south to Anchorage Beach, where they're going to pick you up. So we did this, and it was the other thing I didn't mention is a subalpine forest. So many, you know, you might have a glacier with snow in a subalpine forest, in a subtropical forest, right at the base, which seems hard to believe, but that's what happened. So we hiked through this forest, and it was just wonderful. You're going over walking bridges across, you know, up, you know, 50 feet in the air, similar to Skowhegan, except you're 50 feet in the air, along mountain pass. And this was just one of the beaches. You can see the color of the water.
Yeah, beautiful.
If it were low tide, we could have cut straight across and saved ourselves an hour of walking. But it was high tide, so we had to go out and around. But, you know, and this is the only day it was drizzly. I had bought a raincoat that was supposedly waterproof. Well, the problem is they don't tell you sweat from the inside, and so you get just as wet. I took it off, so it was a drizzle, and you know, it was fine because I had a wool vest on and, you know, long sleeve shirt like this, and you got sort of wet. But 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it dried up. By 4, the sun was out, and that's about the only rain we had, it wasn't really even rain, so we got soaked. We made our way from there to Kikora, which is on the east coast of the North Island. Yeah. And there's a story that goes with this. And
yes. We got to hear that story.
Yes. Too. This is called Keen Point. And in Kikora, kind of, I had heard, geez, this is the most beautiful place. And, you know, when you saw it, it didn't stand out, but we really did enjoy our stay. So we went to Keen Point, we were hiking, and we were overlooking the ocean, and there was a group down there because they have seals, etc. And I saw a man standing there because it was a vantage point. So we walked out near there, and we just started chatting. And I said, I said, where are you from? And we were talking about New Zealand, how friendly we were. And he goes, I'm from Southern California. I said, oh, wow. He's, where are you from? I said, Maine. And he looked at my shirt and he said, oh, you're a Red Sox fan? I said, yeah. And I said, how about you? He goes, well, I played for the Red Sox. So you played for the Red Sox? I said, well, may I ask your name? He goes, yeah, Tom Murphy.
Yeah.
So come to find out, make a long story short, he said I was traded for Bernie Carbo. Bernie Carbo, of course, was the World Series hero.
That's right.
Game 5, hits, or Game 6, hits the home run in the 8th inning to tie it. Carlton Fisk hits it in the 12th, the famous thing, and so it goes to Game 7. Well, Tom Murphy, the next year, the Red Sox needed pitching, so they traded. He was with Milwaukee.
I remember him. Yeah, vaguely, but I do remember him.
So, Bernie Carbo got traded for Tom Murphy, and it was funny because we saw him later, and he introduced to his wife, and he said, here's a funny story. He said, I used to play Yaz, Carly Stremski was my bridge partner. He said, and so we played against Spaceman Lee, and I can't remember the second person. I don't know if it was Louis Tion, but he said, it was amazing. He said, Yaz always seemed to have ace at the bottom of the deck. So I don't know if he was saying he was cheating, but he said, I'm glad I was his partner.
Let's just say Yaz was highly competitive.
He was highly competitive, even in bridge games. So that was just a chance meeting, and that's the thing about, I think, in travel. You just strike up conversations, and you just never know, what's going to happen.
Well, this guy looks as though he could have been a pitcher. I mean, you're fairly tall, and he's much taller.
Well, I did ask about life after baseball, and he said, well, I live in Orange County, and he said, and you know what happened to Orange County? He said, I'm in commercial real estate. He said before Orange County became Orange County, so he was in there for 35 years. So I think he probably did very well.
He probably can afford the trip.
Absolutely, it's like probably in Portland and buying apartment houses at the 70s, and all of a sudden. At the end of our hike, we hiked from there. We met this Tom Murphy and hiked to the south, and it was probably about a 6-mile hike or so, or a walk. And we had remember seeing the food truck, and there was. So this was one of the last things on the Barbie they were cooking, and this is they called crayfish. And it really was, I think it was a rock lobster. And so, of course, we said, we got to do it. And so for, I think it was probably $20 a piece or something like that. But you got the garlic bread and salad and the crayfish. And it was, after a long hike, it was delicious. I mean, it was just fantastic.
I bet. How was the food overall there?
Excellent. And people ask, because one of the things that was a staple of New Zealand, meat pies. And so you go to these bakeries and things, they have these small meat pies, and we did sample a few of those. The lamb is of course big, but it's very international. I mean, I think sometimes you assume you're in a country, and of course fish and chips, because it's a lot of fish and chips, or fish dishes, etc., and of course crayfish, which is probably like a rock lobster. But it's so international. You can get almost anything. I mean, it's like when you say hamburgers, that's everywhere in the world, And we tried to stay away from that, but believe it or not, that was all over the island. And when you got to cities, we were in Dunedin, it was like being in Portland. You can get Thai food, Vietnamese, Indian, American style, New Zealand, so it's very international.
I had a friend of mine who, from college, who traveled at a worldwide trip many years ago. I think it was in the 1980s or early 90s. And New Zealand was his favorite place in the whole world. He says absolutely beautiful, and he bungee jumped there and all these things. Yeah. But one thing he said, the only negative he said was the food was kind of limited. I ate a lot of burgers while I was there.
I think that's very true. Is that as far as so-called native dishes, they do have this caramel type ice cream that the name escapes me, but it was delicious, and that's one of the things they say is a kind of a must. You have to have, and it was delicious, but. I think it's very true of food now throughout the world. You go to most countries and you can get, pizza is big, and you saw that. And I don't recall eating too much pizza, but pizza, hamburgers, of course, cooked locally, and it might be local meat. But I think that's one thing you did find in New Zealand: a lot of farm to table type industry, farm to table, because we had lamb. I said one of our Airbnb course after that Tongariro Alpine crossing cooked us this meal of. Corn on the cob and roast potatoes and lamb and salad. Oh my goodness, it was incredible, and that's why I said the kindness of people. We were in Kokora the next day after meeting Tom Murphy, and this is interesting about social media in the world. I was on Facebook checking. Of course, it's around 6 in the morning in New Zealand, 18 hours ahead. and someone on Facebook in Maine put, wow, this is the sunrise in Maine. So I was sitting in our Airbnb and I said, I wonder what it's like here. And I looked out and saw sort of red. So the beach was only, 5 minutes away. So I put on my coat, walked out. And this was what we saw, and this lasted 20 to 30 minutes. I mean, I stood there, and I texted Jean. She was still in the Airbnb, but I took, of course, many pictures. This was my favorite of it, but it was phenomenal. I'm thinking how close the world is. I mean, from a sunrise, in Maine, that mirrored what exactly I was seeing in New Zealand at the same time. So it was just phenomenal to see this, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. And I was hoping it would shine the mountains behind us. The mountain range was behind us, and I'd hoped it would shine because typically it's like an orange glow. Didn't happen because it was, as you can see, some clouds here. But still, that picture of that sunrise was spectacular. Beautiful. We then left Kikora, drove an Alpine route, and headed inland. And this is one of the most wow moments for me at the time, since we've taken several trips and seen a lot of rock formations, etc. But I'd never seen anything like this. In fact, one of the Chronicles of Narnia had taken place here too. Just checking the time here. Okay, we've got 15 minutes.
We got about 15 minutes. We got 15, and we knew coming into this show that we were going to have a hard time to do it.
I'll zip through.
Yeah, we'll give you a little bit of a quick stuff.
But we're in the South Island. We're in the middle, and we're going to come back to the middle after our travels. But this is over millions of years, where again sedimentary rock. This is the harder part of it, and of course after the rock has eroded, these rocks are left. And again the Chronicles of Narnia, they did a battle scene here at these rocks, and this is called Castle Hill. It was on our way to Arthur's Pass, and Arthur's Pass, stayed in the Airbnb, is in the middle of nowhere, but it was beautiful. And so here is a video, and I don't know how we start the video here. It's like okay here. But this was is this the still? No, it's video. Okay, so we hiked up from our Airbnb in Arthur's Pass. We had just left this Castle Hill to here. And Hunter's going to play the video for us.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you, Hunter.
And so we hiked up to this spot, and this is waterfall. It was just fantastic. And I met some people from Austria here. We were talking German, But this, of course, went down maybe 500 to 1,000 feet. Oh my goodness! And it's that's just part of it, because it goes down below and eventually to the sea.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was incredible. And so that was as you can see here the rise of it. And so we made our way from there to the glacier, and we're now in west of the Alps. We went down the coast, and so we're here called the Franz Josef Glacier, named after Franz Josef, the Emperor of Austria.
Okay.
As you can see, this sign says in 1960 this is where the glacier was, and so you can see that was and there's another sign from 1960, 1990.
Did we
so
get a climate change speech?
Climate change, yeah. And so above that, you say, well, geez, that doesn't look like much of a glacier, but above that, of course, was all glacier. So they have helicopter trips you could take up there, but we did not do that. Again, we spent our money other places. This was the same place. And we hiked around, and this is called Peter's Pond. And it's just a beautiful scene of that where we were, of that Alpine lake there.
Absolutely beautiful.
We then traveled south to Wanaka, and what had happened the night before was the massacre in Christchurch. I mean, we had been out all day, and we got in about 9:30. Opened up my computer, and actually our host in Wellington said to my American friends, I just want you to know we're okay. And I thought, what went on? I thought it was an earthquake.
Yeah.
And so I went on to USA Today and had heard about the massacre in Christchurch. And we were about 200 miles away, so we were plenty safe. But people kept thinking, geez, they knew we were in New Zealand, and we were kind of concerned. So I put out a thing saying, look. So the next morning, of course, it was shock, as you can imagine, and sorrow, and you just imagining. And I'd never been in a place where you felt that couldn't happen here.
Well, that was just it, right? Because they felt it couldn't happen here. We're such a friendly country and so peaceful and this and that, and it just completely stunned them.
It did.
That could
it was, and it stunned us. I mean, and the next day we had planned a hiking. So we came here. This is Lake Wanaka, and it's a beautiful, like a resort type town, but it's not like an old orchard. It was just a lot of things that destination, beautiful, and the mountain. So from here, this is called the Wanaka tree, and the reason why it's considered the most photographed tree in New Zealand is because it grows in the middle of this lake.
Right.
And of course, I think Gene very well captured the spirit of this, because after the massacre, you're kind of thinking there was a spirituality of, how, tough and resilient, and I think, we have to be after, after any
Sure.
crisis, you wonder, the toughness of people. So Gene photographed that. And we were going on a hike to Rocky Mountain, and this was the scene. It was, again, a beautiful day, and this was halfway up, and we hiked up, met a German girl, and she hiked with us, and a girl from England. So we were hiking partners to the top. And again, this is Lake Wanaka. That's a big lake too. I think it's something like I can't remember, 25 to 30 miles long, and this is part of it. So from here. We then moved to Queenstown. I'm going through these fast, but Queenstown. This is called Lake Alta. It's an alpine volcanic lake. You can see the crater here. So we hiked up to this. We drove up actually to one spot, hiked up to this. There's a long story about getting caught in a mountain and bad move, but we made it. As we had to kind of scramble down the scree, and the Tongariro Alpine crossing helped us a great deal in negotiating that. But this was beautiful. It's called Lake Alta, and this is out of Queenstown. In Queenstown, they call it Queenstown Hill, very easy hike. This was one of the hikes that surprised us because we were huffing and puffing. But this is an artist, this is called the Basket of Dreams, and I just thought it was really neat because when you look at it, it was all wrought iron, and they call it the Basket of Dreams, but it was absolutely beautiful scenery here. The next slide shows that. This is the same spot, we were just different vantage point.
All part of the Alps.
All part of the Southern Alps. This is called the Remarkables, and this is one of the things. It runs north to south, and I guess it's one of the few mountain ranges in the world that runs north to south. So that's why I said, why Remarkables? And so and you can see the stripes, the layers of cloud, etc. And this is, again, the lake runs to Glenorchy. We went out to, there's another video coming out to, we did not do this, but A.J. Hackett was the first bungee adventurer. He created bungee jumping. And so we went out to the site over the gorge. And this is a still, but then this is the video that Hunter will play here. We watched this, and we were, ironically, this kid was great.
That's a rush.
All the way down, he's going, and he just loved it. Well, I was standing next to his girlfriend, and she's a skydiver. She goes, he's never done this. He won't do skydiving yet, but I'll get him there.
But he'd do that.
Oh, he was fantastic. He just totally loved it, because the person before took 10 minutes to get her to jump. So anyway, that was
my understanding, and maybe this has changed since my friend was there, because he did bungee jumping, but basically back then it was kind of like, it's your own risk. There wasn't much for any liability forms or anything. If you die, that's your problem.
Yeah, I think they have. I think this was it was a huge, as you can imagine, a huge thing. They have buses. We drove out to it.
Okay.
You could, I'm sure they have to sign forms, but they did have a lot of safety, precautions, and they have men there. They have a boat that you can see. They had drop a weight to stop your, bungeeing, basically. And they grow up. They lower you into this boat, basically like a rubber raft, and the next person jumps.
Oh, wow.
So that was a video. Interesting. We then from, we're Queenstown. Again, we use this as a base. And we met a man. We were hiking up and hardly anybody around through a subalpine forest. And so we saw a man and two people. And we got talking. I said, was it worth, going up? Oh, yeah, beautiful view, etc. So where are from Maine, because that's how he can, oh, wow. He says, I've been to Sugarloaf. Make a long story short, his name is Bill Davidson. He was one of the architects of Maine's Hudson Trails.
No kidding.
L.L. Bean flew him over to set up Maine's Hudson Trails, because he was the general manager of Ultimate Hikes in the Milford Sound. There's a trek that people from all over the world do, the Milford Sound down in Fiordland, and so this is Bill Davidson. We met him, and he said, so he was talking about going, because he laid out the trails where parking lots should be, etc. And because people came from Maine to see the Milford track, to see how it was set up, because they wanted to do this.
Fantastic.
It was fantastic. So we met him, and this was the lake. We were on the way after this hike. We went to Glenorchy to see more Lord of the Rings territory. But we couldn't resist. We had many pictures of this. This is Fiordland. We left Queenstown and went to Teano, and from Teano we went down to this. And this is now going into the deep into Southern Alps, the Milford Sound. And this is called, ironically, Mirror Lake. And the
Mirror
Mirror Lake, the mirror image is more than the, you can see.
Look at that reflection.
So we hiked up to, this is Key Summit. It's part of the Root Burn track. If you hike, and a day through hiker, you could go from hut to hut, and you have to register. But we're day hikers, so this is the first part, and we hiked up to this. But again, through the guidebook, we're a little bit further, and of course, we're treated with this view and the Alps and the day. So we're very fortunate. But this is in Fiordland, and so the next day we from our B&B, they pick you up right at your hostel, and we went to. This is the only one I took. I took many pictures, but the only one I have here of the fjord. This is the fjord, the Milford Sound, and it's a fjord. And so we went out on that, and it was just wonderful. And our driver again knew everything about New Zealand. In fact, he'd go up and see birds, that couldn't see. As he's driving, he'd pull over, and he said so. But this was the Milford Sound, and this is for years. It took him 20 years to build this tunnel to get to this place. Wow. You could only access it by boat. Now you can drive there. We then moved to the Catlins. So if you picture being the Alps on the kind of left side, the Catlins is down in here, and the Catlins, again, is so many interesting places. But this was only picture. I mean, I've got many pictures. I chose caves, and this is called Cathedral Caves. We did a day of exploring.
Huge.
Oh, it is. And so what it does, the sea carved this out, but as it goes in, it can only carve so far because it loses its power. But as you said, that goes in about 300 feet. And there were many caves, but that was one we took. And again, we get the people in there to show you, how far is that. So on the same day, we went from there to, we had to take this picture. We're at Slope Point, and that is the southernmost point of New Zealand. As you can see, the South Pole is that away. So if you from that point, and the equator is that away. And in another direction, Chile. So Chile. So the open ocean is there, and so it was just a fun thing. We were there, Slope Point, and it was just, as I said, we did 3 or 4 things that day. Went to a petrified forest. You look at these trees that turned to stone. They said they're 180 million years old, and you're looking down thinking, how is that possible? But there is a reason why. We went to Dunedin, and I didn't put any picture of Dunedin, but we were heading, up the east coast of the South Island. 2 things I want to mention. We did a lot of things. This is Baldwin Hill. Up until about a month ago, this was considered the steepest street in the world. It's a fifth of a mile. And the fifth of a mile goes from 98 feet above sea level to 300 and something.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
200-foot elevation rise in a fifth of a mile.
Oh,
so you can see the end of the road down there.
Yeah.
And we're just about at the top. And we walked up with a girl from Thailand. And so
I'm hoping there aren't many icy days.
Oh, well, that's what we said too. Because honestly, because even walking up in the houses, here you see the houses like this, and we had pictures of that, but I didn't put them in. But you could see the man walking down the hill here. But it is very interesting. But we took, of course, a funny picture, looking like we're sliding down the hill. So we're in Dunedin, and again, there were 3 or 4 different things we did. From here, we did here, and this is called the Moraki Boulders, and I mentioned near Opanoni, these are more concretions.
Okay.
And one of the things I did notice in New Zealand is I took a picture of one that's going to pop out. I didn't include it here, but it popping out of the cliff. Mm-hmm. And there was a restaurant that was at the top of the cliff. Their deck where people can eat, you could see near the edge, and in time they're going to have to move it back or something, because that's the one thing you see is over time erosion hits a lot of these places. But these are concretions, and because you could walk on them, people walk out here. They're Moraki Boulders. We then moved from there to Oamaru. Thank you. Oamaru. Thank you. I have to picture it in my head is away because some of the Oamaru. But as a city, it was a beautiful city, and this was a hike we did, but overlooking the bay. And we stayed in an Airbnb out in the country. It was just spectacular, and it was wonderful. And that's the only picture I included here, but you can see the sea. They're known for their blue penguins. You pay, but they blue penguins come up and mate. And
blue
penguins, yeah. And
Never heard of that.
Yeah, I know, but that's the one thing I didn't include a lot of wildlife. But when we were down the Catlins, we walked up and saw a sea lion, and walked from here to Hunter over there, just watching them, and we were the only people on the beach, so it's great. This is Mount Cook, and this lake, we were heading to the middle, as I mentioned, we headed to the middle of the South Island again, where Mount Cook, the glacier, is. And this is the other side of the Franz Josef Glacier. Surat Bay, I just look at my notes here. I didn't put the name of this lake, but anyway, this lake, that's the color blue. That's not manufactured. And they call that rock flour, Alpine flour. The minerals from the sea, from the waterfalls and things, bring this down to the lake, and that's the blue. It's Mount Cook is in the background, so that's where we're going to hike up to the next day. And this is it. So what you see here is the area near Mount Cook, and what you see is very murky water. But that's really the glacial melting, and that's bringing minerals down. Eventually, going to end up in the lakes and rivers. You see the blue again here, reflecting what we saw on the Tongariro, if you remember. And you see the moraine. Moraine is the crushed rock, as the glacier, crushes the rock, and it's really like a sand. Unbelievable. And this is a faraway shot. We did another hike across the valley, and you can see Mount Cook, and that's about 12,000 feet.
That's the tallest mountain.
That's the tallest. And I think is Aoraki, they have a Maori name that they use for it now versus Mount Cook. Mount Cook was named after James Cook, was in
the explorer.
And New Zealand, by the way, is named after the Dutch. Zeeland versus but it's Dutch.
That's right.
So anyhow, this is this. I know we're running out of time. But
so we're almost at an hour now, and why don't we do one more slide?
This is it. This is about the end. We were at the Banks Peninsula, and this is again a wonderful place. We spent 2.5 days here. This is Akaroa. We stayed here town, did dolphin watching, and hiked all around here, drove around here. It was beautiful, and that was Jan. It was a friend of ours, mentioned this place, and that's why we ended up there.
Oh,
beautiful.
Well, Mike, when we talked in the beginning, we said, "Oh God, are we going to be able to get all of this in?" And as I said originally, we talked about going 4 different places that you've been to, and after further conversation, we said, "There's no way we're going to do that. That's 4 or 5 hours worth of show." So, anyways, this was absolutely fascinating today. The pictures are unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's just the scratch is what we took,
That's New Zealand, and you've got a number of places where you've been, and a number of places which you're probably going to go to in the next year. Quickly, where are you planning to go in the future?
We're going to go to the Keys in Florida, and we have friends, various spots. We have friends that live in Little Gasparilla Island, so we're going to go with that trip, about 3 weeks in Florida, and then in March, we're going to begin in Tennessee and go to Texas. We have friends in Dallas, and we're really concentrating on the national parks. So as of this trip, we're going to Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and end up just flying out of Salt Lake again. So by that time, we will have done 21 national parks in the last year. So
my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, we've got plenty of material for a future show, and I think Mike has a standing commitment to come back on. Maybe we'll have you back on next fall. This is absolutely wonderful, and thank you, Mike Walker, for coming. And we're going to have to close the show now because we have been an hour. So I want to thank all of you folks for listening. And we'll see you next month on Now You Know.